A long time ago, if this works, a long time ago, a chap in Egypt decided that he'd just come to power. He wanted to communicate with his subjects, and he'd got something to say, he'd got some policies to administer, but he needed to be able to communicate effectively. And one of the problems that he had was that his kingdom had changed somewhat. And this was after the pharaohs. And part of the problem, the only written language at that time, hieroglyphics in the Egyptian world, was only understood by the priesthood. So he had to come up with a solution. And in terms of communication, he decided to do something very, very simple, and I think something that is very relevant to today. Do you know what he did? Do you know what Ptolemy did? Any ideas? Because I have been told you should participate. But it's, I've got something special for you later on, which will make sure you will participate. But do you have any idea what this guy did? Clever bloke that he was. Very simple, really. He came up with a multi-level communication tool that works better than this clicker. And it was called the Rosetta Stone. I guess a lot of you have heard of the Rosetta Stone. It's a very famous thing. It's the only one they found, but it was clever because what he actually did, he chose the 3 languages that were both written and understood throughout his kingdom to be able to communicate to individuals. Now, I'm not going to be talking about language today, but I am talking about communicating in different ways. And I think it's important that we understand that nuance before we start. So good old Ptolemy. Have we got any Egyptian scholars here? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Ptolemy. We're going to move on anyway. So we have the same dilemma today, exactly the same dilemma. How can we communicate very quickly? How can we do it cost effectively? How can we touch as many of the community as we can? Because everybody has preferences. But in doing things, we don't want to get ourselves stuck in a certain way, because we have been for many years in communication stuck in a certain way. And for those of you that have come to this workshop today, you may think, well, Neopost, we were only ever involved in mail because we have been for 80 years. But I'm kind of hoping we can shatter that myth today. Communicating more effectively, therefore, is, and the answer is, digital communication. Or is it? How many of you would agree that digital communication is the way forward? Well done. Thank you for participating. That's wonderful. 3 of you. I'm just doing a little bit of a survey now, because we did commission a survey to try and understand, and we've also read an awful lot of the government documents to understand whether digital is. And the answer to that question is kind of interesting. Some of us in the room will remember this.
Well, let's take a look at a typical office of today. And one of the first things you see, apart from the man working in it, is the filing cabinets. Now, what's going to happen to them, Matt?
Well, most of them are going to go, Chris, along with the invoices and bills. Those are all going to be sent through by the computer.
What about our old office friend, the faithful typewriter? Are we going to say goodbye to that?
The secretary's job will really be enhanced as she's able to help her boss in understanding the sort of speed at which his business is changing.
Does that mean we're going to do away with paper altogether? Are the stationery doors finally going to close?
No, they're not, because people really do still like to read things on paper and not on screens.
Okay, who remembers the computer program in 1983? Anybody here? No, right, I can see all those shaking heads. It was interesting, actually, because the paperless office has been talked about for an awful long time. And clearly they'd said there and made a prediction that it was not going to happen. Has it happened in any of your organisations today? No? Okay, so a quick straw poll. No, we won't do that yet. We'll just talk about the vision, the 2020 vision. Every piece of paper I pick up and read about regarding government, they have this vision. They always put the milestone of 2020 when the whole of Europe and indeed the UK will be digital. Would you agree with that? That seems to be where everybody's aiming at. The interesting question I want to pose now, or maybe you don't think it is what do we mean by digital? Digital can mean so many different things, and just to have a quick snapshot about what we mean by digital, looking back to 1983, is all of those things that have changed in the meantime, and I certainly can remember all of these evolutions. I'm sure some of you in the room may be able to as well. So that's all digital, but I don't particularly want to focus on that part of it today, the technology, the online shopping, all of the other stuff. I'm really kind of interested in digital communication and the communication platforms we use today. So I mentioned we conducted a survey, or at least we didn't, we commissioned one. And we tried to understand where along the curve government, especially local government and education, is. And this is a survey conducted this year. And some highlights from it. I can't read very well without my glasses, and I can't remember everything anyway. What it said was only 14% of organisations have a communications strategy. And that's odd. We asked 12,000 individuals, and we had 560 responses. And what they were telling us is, regards a holistic communication strategy, only 14% of their organisations had actually organised one. 10% of the organisations did plan to reduce postal expenditure. That's interesting to us, because clearly that's where our history lay. And it's a really soft, easy spot to go, because post, as we know now, is extremely expensive. 32% said they're going to centralise physical and digital communications. Now that is really interesting to us, because that's been our story for an awful long time with organisations. It may come as a surprise to most organisations that we sit down with and we're actively trying to persuade them not to send paper communications anymore. And it looked like the message was getting across. 48% of their organisations, and this is the one I think is really kind of interesting, said they wanted to reduce the amount of inbound mail they were getting. Now that, again, is it's far more cost-effective to reduce that than to reduce the outbound mail. So somebody's really got their eye on the ball here. And 62% of organisations said they were or had completed, or in the process of completing, digitising their communications. Right? Does that apply to anybody in the room? Have you completed now your digitisation program? Okay, let's time for that straw poll. If I was to say there's a halfway mark between now and 2020, are you over it or are you before it in digitisation your communication strategy? You're over. And how are you making that calculation? By the amount of email that you're sending in comparison to any other forms of communication? Sorry, you were interacting with me, so I'm going to pick on you. Yeah, you, definitely.
Well, basically, the organisation I work for, we're moving to a new digital platform.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been rolled out yet, but I know we're moving to sort of cloud system as well. I don't know much about all the technical aspects of it. Basically, we'll move into a mobile phone format, so desktop phones. What else? Email. We can start rather than using like Outlook and tie to your desk or the network in the organisation. You actually use a cloud-based system, so you can access emails anywhere.
Fantastic.
Stuff like that.
Okay, when's it coming?
We're going to be rolled out, well, we're going to have September, by the end of the year.
How long have they been talking about it?
I think, I've certainly known about it for the last couple of years, I'd say. I don't know how far beyond that.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that point later, but thank you very much for making the point with us. A couple more things. This isn't our survey. This is, anybody read this survey, going where the eyeballs are? Anybody in the audience have read it? No, because that is a massive number. And this is a total expenditure. I had to read it a couple of times to understand. 10 to 25% of the amount of money that estimated could be saved by digitising. 15 to 35%, kind of a loose number, but that's the amount of time that could be saved by interacting digitally, so this survey says. 77%, the numbers are getting bigger, you will have noticed, felt that digital technology is the key to delivering, and I don't know how they make the calculation again, 28% of the savings in 2015. And the final number, 79% of respondents agreed that digital technology, I didn't get that figure when I asked the audience about digital migration, could help create more personalised council service. That I do have to agree with. And final bit of information. When we conducted that previous survey, there was the biggest chunk of individuals or organisations said they were gaining insight. They were considering what they were going to do. By far the biggest element of them. So they were still in the planning phase and the investigation phase. So let's move on from the survey and ask ourselves a question: can we really do without paper now? Some of you in the audience said yes and some said no. I've got 3 case studies to show you. One of them is very definitely where they can't do without paper, but that doesn't mean to say they can't digitise. I'll explain. It's an interesting choice, but very relevant when we look at can we do without paper, because it covers the bowel cancer screening service in the UK. It was established in 2007 and it's got a very simple, I keep forgetting I can't click remotely now, so forgive me. The objective was, let's see if we can sample the whole of the country and find out if anybody's going to have cancer, so we can catch it and treat it easily and soon. And this starts at the age of 60. So that was the challenge. What they wanted to do was, the easiest way of finding bowel cancer is to test the feces of an individual to see if there's a presence of blood, which is interesting. But they had to do it in the most cost-effective manner because there wasn't a huge amount of money for this particular process at the time. So they considered very strongly, what do? Do we bring the people to the test, as we do in many instances, like breast screening? Or do we take the test to the people? Now, people to the test was very, very expensive. Test to the people isn't quite so expensive. So that's what they decided to do. They were going to send a test kit to the population of everybody over 60 in the country, just in England, this is, and they will have that test kit returned using physical mail. That was their best and most efficient, quickest way of doing things. And the challenge was very complex. Now this is part 2 of the participation part of the thing. So I've got some tests here. I'm going to see who's over 60, see if anybody would like to have a go at it. So I'm not going to really, because I think I'd get myself into trouble. Let me just show you what it comprises of. It had to be paper because there was a letter that explained to the customer, for want of a better word, you're over 60, you may be prone, we're going to be sending you a kit, we'd like you to utilise the kit and send it back. The kit was interesting, but of course you sent a leaflet just to explain. And another leaflet. You'd send the actual kit itself, which is the business end, if you like, of the application. You'd send a very, very secure, sealable envelope, because this has to be transported through the post, and the Royal Mail can get a bit funny about that sort of stuff. So it had to be a specially protected envelope. And this is my favourite bit. They send you an envelope full of poo sticks, which is interesting. Now, where do we digitise this? This was a challenge. It's a challenge to put all of that stuff in an envelope efficiently anyway. And the way the screening hub started doing it, they did it manually. So they had a load of people in a room, all putting all of these packs together to send them out. And that was great, apart from the fact that it was slow. They weren't covering the ground quick enough. And they were encouraged to talk to ourselves by the breast screening, because we'd already provided breast screening with a lot of mailing equipment to get the letters out. But this was the really interesting piece that caused the most consternation, the actual kit itself. Let me explain. What we wanted to do was automate and digitize the program. Automate because there was a lot of people in the room and it was very slow, and by automation, putting all that stuff in an envelope, we could do it a heck of a lot quicker. Digitize because we needed to do something very specific. Is anybody here from the NHS? No? Oh, remarkable. Beg your pardon, who are you? Oh, there you are, right at the back. Okay. You have a database system called Exeter.
I work in a sort of funny part of the NHS. So
Oh, right, fine, okay. The NHS have a database system called Exeter, and what that holds is a whole lot of data on us, and they use that to be able to generate, or use that data to generate the letter, the initial letter that is going to be sent to you. So they know your age, they know your number, your NHS number, and they know where you live, which is important. So what they actually want to do is send you a letter to say, you're 16, you need to do this test. What they do now, and that they didn't do before, typically that letter was produced, printed off via Exeter, printed off, and a load of people would sit around and collect stuff together. And a very personalised sample, and it had to be personalised, was matched with the document so it could be sent to the right individual. In other words, the right letter with the right test kit, because this test kit has to come back and it has to say who it belongs to. Otherwise, all sorts of problems could be had. So what we do is we pass it through a piece of technology that scrapes off the address and the NHS number, and it actually passes it to another device. So we print out the patient's letter, and we print directly onto the test kit code. So nobody can read it to say this is Fred Smith's. It's a barcode and some 2D information, and that contains all of the information that the screening program needs when it comes back in to be able to update who it was, what the return is, so on and so forth. So we could track it around and tell the unfortunate recipient of the right thing to do. So we match that document and that is a digital communication method in a very, very manual process. But of course, what we also do at the time when we scrape that address is have a look at the address and see if it conforms to the postal address file, because if it conforms to the postal address file, we can get a discount by utilising many of the discount programs, and it doesn't matter who the carriers are, all of them relate to the address. And by adding additional data to the address field, we can get an even cheaper price for the post. So that's what we do. We pop it through. It's fulfilled automatically on a machine. This is just one example of those. And the data that the machine sees as it's reading this going through uploads into the document management system and the system that is used to manage all of these returns. So very important. So here we've got a very manual process that we took from being manual without any checks or balances and no digital. We took the output from Exeter, we digitized it and then started to match it. We still produced the documents. We automated that process so it became a lot faster. Today, 12 million kits have been sent using this on 5 screening centres across the UK. I don't know the exact figure, but the last figure that I read, 160,000 lives have been saved because of the early preventative treatment of that. So something we're proud of. It's something we're continuously working with the Barratt screening clinics to improve. The improvements now come with digitisation and the tracking of that data rather than how quickly we can get them through the postal service. So that's talking about can we really get rid of paper. Let's talk about less paper. And here we have, we've had a little technological breakdown earlier on with our video screen, so I'm going to ask my colleague just to set this running for us. Short video clip just to put us in the mood. Does anybody watch Click on a Saturday morning? I love it. So this is a clip from Click. We hope.
Welcome to Click, I'm Spencer Kelly, and welcome to Cambridge. Behind this gate is Trinity College, which houses almost 300,000 volumes in its library. So it's perhaps a bit ironic that historic Cambridge could soon be at the forefront of the paperless revolution. More on that in a second, but first, LJ Rich has been wondering why it hasn't happened yet.
You'd think 1,000 years of paper would look, I don't know, bigger. This overtly governmental building in southwest London houses the National Archives. Think of it as Britain's filing cabinet. It also happens to be one of the largest archives in the world. Inside, over 180 kilometres of shelf space and over 11 million historical government and public records. Most original documents can be produced in their original paper form for visitors to read. But less than 8% of the archives have been digitised, because going paperless here is pricey.
We worked out what it would cost, not just to reduce the amount of paper we're producing every day, but to write that out, and it came to £259 million to reduce the number of boxes we're producing in the reading room just by 20%. Now, we're a government department, we have nowhere near that amount of money, neither does the whole private sector put together in this figure.
Extraordinary number, £259 million for 20%. And that's a point I wanted to make, really, because what they've got is a challenge of new stuff coming in to be added, and they've also got a challenge of old stuff that they wanted to store in a different way. But the next presentation, or the next case study that we're going to talk about, is potentially what I think you're all probably doing in some way, shape or form. Some of you may have even completed the project altogether, but it's one worth considering. And it's from a neighbouring council or authority, and it's the London Borough of Hackney. Anybody here from London Borough of Hackney? That's a no. Huge amounts of inbound volume. They had this special place where everything came to, which was their service centre, which was fantastic. But it caused a lot of problems, you know, people having to travel from various different offices to retrieve the documents they needed to do their day-to-day work. It really developed some really serious security issues. We've got a lot of duplication of files, so people weren't actually necessarily working on the latest part of the file. On top of that, it was labour intensive and it was space intensive. And that resulted in a very high cost and poor service. So just looking at that in isolation, they said that we needed to change it and solve all of those problems. Because they had a massive room full of records, a bit like the archive, but not quite as significant. So what did they do? This is just a graphic of the way they used to work. They had a whole host of people understanding what was being sent to them, and then another batch of people deciding what to do with those documents and where to put them for the work groups to work with them. And it took a long time, you know, for all of these people to triage all of this stuff and to make sure it got to the right place. So they decided they wanted to remove a lot of the understanding and deciding phase and digitize it. And the way that we were going to digitize it in the first instance is if they were sending a document out that needed to come back, to make sure they gave it all of the relevant identification so it could be seen quickly and then handled very automatically once it was received. So we're talking scanning a physical piece of paper and then moving it through the system. This has really immediate benefits in terms of speeding processes up, because automatically you have a bypass situation happening where it doesn't even have to go into that triage. and can go straight into the system without touching a key, because the document is carrying all of the information that is required to tell it where to go when it comes back in. The interesting thing about the council, when you looked at or heard that number from Archive and thought, right, all those millions of pounds to be able to save that, this is the report from the Hackney report to members. They estimate they saved £7 million, because they've looked at it slightly different. They said, well, if we didn't have or hadn't have done this, we'd have had to have another building, because what they did when they collapsed the old system, they freed up all that huge amount of space. So immediately they saved what they estimated to be £7 million. And that's just thinking outside of the box. Because the cost of doing this wasn't inexpensive, but it didn't stop them investing to save. They now think they save £200,000 a year just employing that environmental system. So you can see who has got a project similar to that going on in their organisation at the moment? Just yourself. Have you already got one, everybody else, or?
Well, we're sort of like probably set before that, because all of our documents are in the building. They're not archived even in one place, so they're spread across the whole building. We don't have EDRMS.
Right.
And we're thinking obviously planning for that and then looking at the scanning functionality, but as a stepping stone, looking just to get, rather than scan a lot,
Yep,
take
absolutely.
the offsite, which obviously frees the building up to bring some of that revenue capital receipts back.
Yep. Absolutely, because the access, once it's digital, once it's in there, it's very easy to. Super. So that's a project in play. May I ask the same question? How long has it been in play?
It has been in play probably for about early stages, but probably 6 months. And we're in the sort of design and planning phase now.
And you've got a timeline for completion?
All of our sort of digital stuff is within the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, again, because the cloud scenarios coming in, that we're looking at EDRMS, and that's kind of moved up to all like the lot type thing.
So there was a program that's now been binned, so we've moved on to something else.
Yeah, physical shift out will happen once we've got some of the building side of it sorted out. So that's going to probably take a while to get that sort of hot desk and stuff working as well.
Sure. The world's going to change very quickly shortly, isn't it? Okay, let's move on from much less paper, because we've had the paper, can't do without it, but we can digitise certain parts of the process. We've now got paper that's coming at us that we don't necessarily control, but there's something we can do to digitise it and manage it better and bring savings to play. And let's talk about migration, and this is probably more interesting than anything else, because the way I see digital, looking at that original clip way back in 1983, it isn't a big bang. How many of you have still got filing cabinets somewhere close by to you at work? Yeah, it just doesn't go away. It takes some time to get to where you need to be. I think migration is the right word. So in 2004, in the Southwest, a client services centre was set up by the NHS Shared Business Services. We got NHS heavy on these three, but not to worry. The objective was to centralise the inbound bills from suppliers and manage them more effectively. And at the same time, do something about the cost of sending these bills around the NHS, and it was a significant expenditure. You could do that in two ways. You can do it by reducing the price of the stamp, and you could also do it by reducing the amount of actual envelopes that were flowing anyway. The options were, do we do it manually, because it was a kind of a tricky thing to do? Could we automate it, or could we digitize it? But the reality is, this is where the migration part of the phase is. The selected option that they chose was, let's automate it, because it was, again, fully manual at one stage. So we automated it by incorporating parts of digitization. So we had paper bills coming at it that we read, digitized, put in a stream, compiled together, and then put them in a better format for their onward journey. And their onward journey was really down to the individuals who wanted to receive them. and the documents that were being received. And that's the problem. Again, with inbound mail, you never know what you're going to get. So there's a whole process of education, which isn't immediate, and it does take some time, of educating. If somebody's sending you something, could you send it with these 3 pieces of information? Because if you give me those, I can get you paid quicker, and that's essentially what happened. The way forward then was educate the biller, collect the alternative address details, so we could migrate away from physical mail. What do we mean by an alternative address detail? What do you think I mean? Email. It's the easy, quick win. How easy is it in your experience to get somebody to give you an email to receive something rather than a postal address? Would you say it was easy or would you say it was difficult? Easy? Oh, we've got a conflict of opinion, that's fine.
Depends on the age of the person.
Ah, right, okay, so the demographic effect starts to happen, and then there's cultural differences inside the businesses, so on and so forth. I only say that really because if we have a look at that particular client today, NHS Shared Services, they are sending about 150,000 communications per month. And 25% of those, for 140 NHS clients, 25% of those are by email. So I'm really kind of saying, if it was that easy to be able to get it converted, remember when they started, in 2008, they started to email, and yet they still only got 25%. That's accelerating, and they can see, and they've drawn a graph, so they understand that by 2015, they anticipate that 50% of that had moved over. Now that brings a huge amount crashing down in terms of cost. And they do have a vision, which I don't actually agree with, that they will have 100% communication by digital means. I cannot see, because I've heard about it since 1983 and before, the paper is actually going to leave us completely. If we get to 99%, I think that would be a real win for us all. Do you have any questions regarding that particular process? I haven't got a schematic to show you on that one. But essentially, it was a paper process that was enhanced using digital technology that helped them be able to migrate through the platform to email. So let me explain that a little bit further. Easy multi-channel communication. The wonderful cartoony looking graphic in the top corner there is an IT system. It's state of the art. Typically, and historically, this is what used to happen. Data used to be sent to a printer where we print a piece of paper. From the printer, we would fulfill it, we would fold it, put it into an envelope, or get a machine to fold it and put it in an envelope, and we'd bung it in the post. And that was great, and that was the world that was, and it happened for an awful long time. And not much mind was paid to who was going to carry it, because there was only one carrier until the very recent future. There was Royal Mail. And not much thought was going into about how much we pay for the stamp. Which is interesting, because nothing changes really about the source of the data. The data still comes out of the same system. But again, by passing it through technologies, we can do an awful lot to enhance that journey of that document. The first thing we always look at as Neopost is the address correct? We mentioned it once before, and we're talking about the postal address at this particular time. Because if the postal address is incorrect, you can't get a cheaper stamp, the journey might take longer, and in the near future, you're not going to be able to avail yourself of something called delivery point suffix. Delivery point suffix is your house. If you contain that in a barcode on an address, you get the maximum amount of discount you can get from any carrier, be it Royal Mail or any of the alternatives, because it makes their automation process and their digitization process a whole lot simpler. So while we're looking at that, because we've got this document electronically, or the data electronically that we're now looking to enhance, we apply all of the relevant postal discount structures, and we add intelligence to the actual document to do a load of different things. We talked about Hackney and adding intelligence and identification to the document, so when it came back in, it could bypass everything and go straight to the work group that it needed to go to. In addition to that, and this is the point really where we're coming to, if you're in this hub, all of the data, and you're creating a document, this is the ideal time to then say, what is my best and preferred communication method? Not just preferred by me, but also preferred by the recipient. And that is the really important part of today's communication process. The people in the charge of government, all of us in this room probably have a different way that we prefer to receive our data and communication. The trick is identifying how you want to do it and then automating the process of passing it to you. Lowest possible cost, fastest possible speed. And the technologies that we employ today allow you to do that. It also allows you to offer a migration platform to be able to say, I need to do 20% of it this way, 30% of it this way, 40% of it this way, but keep control and visibility of everything you're saying to everybody. And that's really important. As is the money that can be saved by automating the inbound flow of those documents. If you're clever with the outbound flow, your inbound flow and the prizes that lay there are really, really huge. And then of course you can pass it back to the work group. You can do whatever you need to do to make that journey more effective, both out and back in. Any questions regarding this? Fantastic. So what we're talking about is communication in context, delivering the right message at the right time to the right people in the way they want to receive it. If we look back at good old Tomerley, that's what he was saying. I know there's people out there that don't even read hieroglyphics. They speak a completely different language, but I want to get my points and policies and view across. And that's what he did. He used a multi-layered channel, or multiple layers of channels to get to, albeit a language or a written language. So we come to the bit where I was saying this is the lean bit, I suppose, in many ways. Although Neopost actually does its lean bit, because when you're a salesperson looking for something to sell, what you're actually doing is analysing processes and then taking back a story that hopefully somebody will say, yeah, actually, you're right. How can you accelerate yourself along the curve? These are the sales mistakes that we make, actually, as well as anything else. You know, we need to understand today precisely how we communicate. Has any of you got an organisational map that maps your whole outbound communication process? Right, okay, I'm a great believer in navigation. And if you don't understand where you are today, you haven't really got a clue of how to get to where you're going, because you've got to understand your starting point. So if I would say the one thing that will help you to get to where you need to be along that curve, because most of you have said digitisation, and certainly the survey said, digitisation is going to be where all of our cost savings are, is make a map. Look for the manual or paper processes specifically. Why do I say that? We are in the business of paper and have been for a very long time. We know, and we've known for 20 years, that is a dying process. For 20 years we've been building technologies that we can do clever things to paper that has to stay, but also help you move very quickly away from those paper processes. If you look at those elements, you're going to find some real gems to save some money. Target quick, easy, bite-sized wins. Your comment, sorry, thank you. Could you engage with me again? Don't know your name. Hi. Your comment earlier, you know, 2 years it's been on the go.
Yeah, my name's Dorian.
Dorian, thank you. My name's Russell.
Yeah, it's roughly about 2 years, I think. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
So they could have been going on behind the scenes.
So quite a long time. Yeah. And again, a bit like the young lady over there, don't know your name?
Liz.
Hi Liz, Russell. You're looking at bite-sized chunks, I guess. Not just doing the whole big mega project, but what you can positively affect. And that, I think, is what we hear. Quite often, as you'll see when we come to the risks, people wait for something to happen inside the organisation rather than affecting the bit that affects you because you know there's a better way that can be done. I can't emphasise enough, talk to people that have done it. There's lots of people out there that have done it. We've got a book full of case studies that are here today if you want to go and pick one up. And we'll gladly tell you who we've done it to. If you say, have you ever done one of these, we'll show you a couple of dozen companies that we want you to talk to. So talk to us and all of the others, the suppliers that are actually doing it, because although we're probably famous for our franking machines, we don't want to be famous for our franking machines going forward. We want to be famous for other things. Most importantly, and you must never forget this, you've got to engage with the recipients, because they're the ones that will tell you how they want to receive it. There is a way that you can send to any of those technologies, very simply using the right platforms to be able to do it without a great deal of effort, that can be installed without a huge IT project. And it's a very, very simple, easy way to be able to get you going on that migration curve. If you talk to your recipients and you talk to all of the people, you'll get a good clue about what you can do now and what you can't. There's a lot that you can't do still. I'm sure the bowel screening program would love to fully digitise. We've digitised just about as much as we possibly can do now, and it's down to paper. And until we get matter transportation, and I don't like the idea of that one, then we've got a real problem. Avoid building obsolescence into your plan. I think that came out a little earlier, where we were moving along with one plan and then something else popped up, and all of a sudden that one's cancelled because this looks more attractive and more modern, and you're going to be running to that one. So if you're looking at something to give you a migration platform, make sure that it's going to be able to grow with you in your communication needs. And again, that is a lot simpler than you would imagine it could be. Join the dots up digitally. What do I mean by that? It might mean that there's a lot of paper out there. There's lots of digital steps that you can make between paper to make you ready for digitalization. So what are the common pitfalls? 100% digital is rarely the answer. We've seen many, many organizations run for it. We've seen many organizations actually fail miserably, cause a lot of expense, because they're trying to do the mega project, the big bang effect, and it really is something that I would counsel you to steer away from. Make sure that the deliverables that you're expecting are measurable, and avoid operating in isolation. If you don't engage with your whole community and get them to understand what you're trying to achieve and get some quick wins for them, which comes back to the mega project, everybody will say, yeah, I've heard, last 2 years, it's on the way. You won't have them. What you need to visibly give people is some very quick wins and explain what those wins are. If you don't fully understand the impacts of the digital change, then you could actually make a false turn. You could actually disengage yourself from your recipient. Because there are some things that we've seen businesses do that say, okay, fine, we're going to digitize that, they've done it, and it's impacted on their inbound revenues or their communication strategy and so on. And don't set unrealistic expectations in timelines, on return on investment, and don't ever think somebody else will do it, because that's the story we hear so many times. Or one of the common ones is we'll build it ourselves, which is interesting too, because that never happens either. And quite often we go back a year or two later to talk to a company or an organisation that had potential to save many thousands of pounds just to find them in exactly the same place as when we left them a year and a half earlier. I thought you were building your own. Yeah, we kind of tried, but then something else came along and we got disturbed. So don't ever think somebody else will do it. Grab hold of that project and make it happen. So, what are the rewards? You can communicate more effectively if you have a look at doing all of the things that we've talked about today. Doing bite-sized things, joining up the dots digitally. Look for those paper opportunities that you can digitize very quickly. You can do it with clarity and compliance, and this is the most important thing in public sector, and one thing I've learned is everybody wants to make sure that they're ticking the box of compliance. If you've got a single place where all of your communications pass through, come out, are redirected, and you can see and touch those, you will always be in control of your communication. What we really want to do is communicate more often with much less expense. Doesn't matter about the demographic. My mum's a good texter. My mum's she's twice as fast as I am. She doesn't Facebook. I don't Facebook. My daughters all Facebook. I don't Facebook. So if you ask me how do you want to go, well, please don't put it on Facebook because I don't read it. Yeah, I'll go for text. So email. My life is lived by email, so give it to me. Please don't give me paper. Open my briefcase, it's far too heavy. All of that kind of stuff. So if you understand the preference of the recipient and you're fine, you will be able to reduce your expense. It will be more efficient. And you're in a position to be able to adopt new technology earlier. If you have a look at all the technology changes that are coming at us very quickly now, you look at the speed of acceleration of that curve, all of the things. Did you see Facebook when it first came out and thought, okay, don't get it? Well, I did, but then I'm old. But my kids saw it and thought, I get it, and I really want it, and it's massive. And then you've got Twitter. Anybody here tweet? Yeah, there's a lot of tweeters at the back. Why are all the tweeters sitting at the back? I don't know. Good answer. I wish I had thought of it. Okay, so we're running ahead of time, which is amazing. We've got 2 minutes left. It's not so amazing. Okay, talking about Neopost know-how, there's loads of stuff that Neopost touch you in your lives you probably don't even appreciate. The last time you went in a shop and they said, oh, what's your house number and what's your postcode? There's a very high likelihood that behind that is a Neopost technology that's giving them the correct address for their records. So when they write to you, they can do it at the lowest possible cost. There's an absolute 100% chance if you booked a parcel online using an online internet service that it is driven through Neopost technology. 1 in 5 documents that are produced that go through all of the fulfillment houses of the world, the places where your annual billing is sent from because you haven't got the wherewithal or the facility to do it yourselves. 1 in 5 of those documents are managed, created, and organised by Neopost technology. So if I had a mission today, and I did, my mission was, could I get the audience, however big it was, to consider Neopost not as a franking machine company, but at the core of communication? And I would have achieved my objective. So one last question for you. Have I achieved my objective in saying that Neopost is a little bit more than a franking machine company? Good. I lied about the one more question. It's very difficult to be interactive. I hope I've asked sufficient questions for you to be able to take something from what we've done. Do any of you have any further questions for me at this point?
So the main one for me would be, obviously trying to cost out exactly where the outgoing post comes from is quite straightforward.
Yep.
But when you said then the big savings are from incoming posts.
Yeah, about 3 times the value.
Is that mainly through the staff handling cost of that?
There is that element to it, and it's really everything, because it's not just the staff handling, it's the entire life of that document thereafter, which is improved. So, just capturing that first bit. There's another point I must make absolutely clear. Neopost don't do consultancy. We do consultancy we don't charge for, and we're happy to visit anybody to be able to say, if you need any help mapping your processes, if you need any help understanding where it's possible to join the dots up, that's all done as part of our service and at our risk. So we're happy to come along. The only thing we're banking on is when we show you how we can do it and how little it costs to get there, is that you'll trust us as a provider. But we're not leveraging with your arm at the back, okay, give me £20,000 and I'll tell you where the pot of gold is. We are actually there to deliver that service to you. So there's one last thing. You're a group of individuals that probably have met before, probably haven't. I certainly haven't met any of you. What we'd like to do is host a digital forum on LinkedIn. and we'd like for you to join. We'll send you the joining instructions. We're sending them to everybody anyway. So we can start to share. And if you've got a problem, we said talk to somebody who's done it. If we're here and you say, well, I've got a bit of a problem here, don't know what to do with it, maybe somebody in the audience has already done that one thing. And that's what we'd like to promote. So we can all get to that end game of 2020 with 100% digital communication that will never happen in the future. Okay, so thank you very much for your time and your attendance and your participation. Thank you.